Welcome to our class on Chassidus. We're going to be learning a beautiful Chassidic discourse from the Rebbe. The name of the Chassidic discourse is called Tzidkas Purzono B'Yisrael. The Rebbe said this Chassidic discourse on Shabbos Parshas Beshalach. That year, it was the 11th day in the month of Shvat, in the year Tafshin Chav Dalid, exactly 60 years ago. So again, the Chassidic discourse is based on one of the verses in the prophet of this week, where it says, Tzidkas Purzono B'Yisrael. And the Rebbe brings from the previous Rebbe, who he just celebrated his Yom HaHilula, the day of his passing, and he brings what it says in the Talmud. Rabbi Yoshia says, and the Rebbe points out, Oshia comes from the same name of Yeshua, salvation, and the Talmud says, this that the verse says in the prophets, Tzidkas Purzono B'Yisrael, what does that mean? So the Talmud explains, Tzedakah asa Kadosh Baruch Hu B'Yisrael, God did a tremendous kindness for the Jewish people, Shepizron, that he spread them out all over the world. In other words, and Rashi explains, what's the righteousness that was spread all over the world? Isn't it better when everyone's together? And he says, the reason is, Rashi explains, because if you're all over, you can't wipe them out in one shot. They're all over the place. So if someone gets hurt here, someone else, somewhere else is saved. Now, the Rebbe explains, what are we? You know, obviously we have a body, we have a soul, but who are we? What is our essence? What is the essence of the Jewish people? So the essence of the Jewish people is the fact that we learn Torah and we do the mitzvahs of Hashem. Up to the point that not only when we learn Torah and we do the mitzvahs, but even when we do our mundane activities, whether it's work, whether it's errands, whatever we're doing, we do it in a way like it says in the prophets, B'chol d'rachecha de'eyu. In everything that I do, I know Hashem. So the essence of a Jew is learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, and even in mundane acts, it's all about knowing Hashem in the physical activities that we do. So therefore, the previous Rebbe explains, what does that mean they can't destroy us? It's referring to not just destroying us physically, it's referring to destroying us of Torah and mitzvahs. Learning Torah and mitzvahs, because that's who we are. They can't destroy our learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. In other words, why is that? Because the fact that we're going to be spread out all over different countries, and that means even if we're in one country and they try to oppress us and suppress us, and they don't allow us to go ahead and learn Torah and do mitzvahs, so what happens is, besides the fact that the Jewish people in other countries, they do learn Torah and they do mitzvahs, but even what happens is when they learn Torah and do mitzvahs, they give power and strength that even somebody that's in a place where you can't learn Torah and do mitzvahs, even though they're not learning Torah and do mitzvahs, they're not getting their essential spiritual requirements, we get it from another place. And that's number one. And number two is it gives the people that's going through the challenge real power to be intimidated of the decrees that's not allowing us to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, and they nevertheless learn Torah and they do mitzvahs. How do they do it? And I'll say it in Hebrew, b'toikef d'mesiras nefesh, with the real power of self-sacrifice. So because the fact that somewhere else in the world, someone's learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, that gives the person the place where he's going through the struggle, the power to, as great as a struggle is, to still learn Torah and do mitzvahs, to keep the eye on the prize with the power of what? Of mesiras nefesh. Now, what happens then is, then not only can the decree of the nations of the world that's trying to stop us from learning Torah and the mitzvahs, and therefore they can't destroy us, but on the contrary, what happens is, those that learn Torah and do mitzvahs in a way of mesiras nefesh, it's much more powerful, it's much stronger. Up to the point, the Rebbe says, that it's in a way of, and I'll say it in Hebrew, I'll translate it, l'maylo mimedida v'hagbala. It's infinite, there's no limits. And in a way of, the expression, like it says in the Torah, ufaratza, you spread out all over the place. Why is it that when you're threatened not to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, and you go ahead and you fight it, and you learn Torah anyway, and you do the mitzvahs anyway, why is that? Why is it so powerful? Because when you do that, you're doing it in a way of Mesiras Nefesh. You're literally sacrificing your life. And when a person sacrifices his life, that's much higher than the normal flow of things, because logically you'll say, listen, they're not letting us learn Torah and do mitzvahs. Okay, fine, so I'll wait for things to pass, meanwhile we won't do it. So that's a logical calculation, or emotionally it doesn't feel right. But when you go ahead and you learn Torah and do mitzvah anyway, you're reaching a place above your ishtalshelus, and therefore you go above yourself, and that causes the tremendous power of Mesiras Nefesh that your Torah and mitzvahs is much stronger. And like we know that the way generally, the general flow, in Hebrew it's called the Hishtalshelus, that we generally operate, so we know we think first. What does that mean? We use Chabad, Chacham Bin Adas, we think it through, we use the power of intellect. However, when it comes to the power of Rotzain, because we know the highest sphere, which is Keser, there's Tainig and Rotzain, so Rotzain, the will, is above Ishtalshelus. No, you don't start off with Rotzain, you start off normally with intellect. There are times, you go to Rotzain, when you're threatened, Mesiras Nefesh. And when you're in a place of Mesiras Nefesh, when you have to go and self-sacrifice, where is that coming from? It's not logic, it's coming from the power of Rotzain, of will, which is above intellect. And that's why he finishes off in the Chassidic discourse, that when a person goes ahead and learns Torah with Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, what happens then is, and I'll say it in Hebrew, Yumshach Rav Tuv Lebeit Israel. What happens is when you go on Mesiras Nefesh and you learn Torah, and you do mitzvahs, and you're coming from a place of Rotzain, which is the essence of who we are, then what happens is we receive tremendous, huge blessings for the Jewish people. And like Rebbe says, it doesn't say toiv with a chaylam, but it says tuv with a malupim, which means it's much stronger. It's talking about a good which is much greater than regular good. What type of good is that? It's a good which is above levels of logic and the regular normal flow, and that's why it says rav tuv, an abundance of tremendous amount of good. And since what happens is when a person goes on Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, that's above what's required. You can't demand someone to go on Mesiras Nefesh. Logic is, listen, it's a danger, I can't learn Torah mitzvahs. It's a legitimate excuse. But when you don't use the excuse and you do it, it means you're going out of your comfort zone, and then you reach a place in Hashem which is also above the comfort zone. And when a person therefore goes on Mesiras Nefesh to learn Torah, you draw down Rav Tuv, tremendous abundance of good for the Jewish people, and it doesn't stay at us and high. It comes down, like Rebbe says, Lamato Ma'asar Tvachim, literally down in this physical world, but a good that's seen and a good that's revealed. Spiritual goodness and physical goodness. So what do we see before we go forward? What's Rebbe saying? That when a person goes ahead and is struggling for whatever reason, they're not allowing him to learn Torah do mitzvahs, and therefore logically you can have an excuse not to. But you go ahead and you go on Mesiras Nefesh, that means you're going out of your comfort zone, then you bring down tremendous blessings beyond the regular normal blessing that we normally in store for us, and it comes down to the physical world. So based on Shir explains, that's why it says Tzidkas, Purzoinoi B'Yisrael. In other words, the seemingly, what do we learn from the Talmud? It says that Hashem did a tremendous kindness that He spread us all over the world. And based on we learned that what happens is when a person goes on Mesiras Nefesh, you receive a much greater blessings. So if that's the case, it should have said not Tzidkas Pirzoinoi, it should have said Tzidkas Pizroinoi. The fact that we're spread out all over the world. That's what it should have said in the verse. Why? Because the kindness that Hashem does for us is why? Because we're spread out all over the world and in one place. You're not all learn Torah, and the other place you learn Torah, and that brings up Mesiras Nefesh. So the blessing is the fact that we're spread out. So the verse should have said Tzidkas Pizroinoi, that we're spread out, not Parzunoi. In other words, so the Rebbe explained, because the spiritual work of Mesiras Nefesh, when a person goes in self-sacrifice, which is above logic, And then when you do your avoid of above logic, what happens is you bring in from a level of Rav to a tremendous amount of goodness, which is above the normal blessings. And like it says in the verse, Prozois Teishev Yerushalayim, which means that Jerusalem is going to be spread out infinitely. And Rashi says it's not going to have any limits. So in other words, the Rebbe is explaining it like this. The verse says, Tzidkas Purzoinoi. What does the Talmud explain? Tzidkas, that the Hashem did a blessing that he spread us out. So if that's the case, it's a Pizroinoi, the verse says it's Pizroinoi. And the Rebbe explains, no. Yes, it's true. The blessing comes from the fact that Hashem spread us out, and that's the source of it. But what happens when he spread us out and we go Mesiras Nefesh? Because we go Mesiras Nefesh, we reach a place of Pirzoinoi, of the infinite blessings. So even though it's the fact that Hashem spread us out, that creates the spark. But ultimately, what's the blessing? As Pirzoinoi. And like the Rebbe is going to explain now more in depth. And he says like this. He says we know that what is Yerushalayim? Jerusalem, on a spiritual level. So Yerushalayim is made up of two words. Yerushalayim, the ultimate in awe of Hashem, complete awe of Hashem. In other words, there's different levels in being in awe of Hashem, and this is the highest level, the complete level in awe of Hashem. What does that mean practically? And the Rebbe says it's referring to the essence of being in awe of Hashem, which is not based on logic. So you can be in awe of Hashem, you can have a logical calculation. For whatever reason, you think, listen, God created the world, he maintains the world, therefore I'm in awe of Hashem. That's coming to a place of logic. Or you can be in awe of Hashem, not for any reason, you're just in awe of Hashem. You can't explain it, you can't describe it, etc. Which is called Oitzer Shel Yerushalayim, the treasure of Yerushalayim, where you're just in awe of Hashem, just because. If someone asks you a reason, you give a reason, it's not just because. It means just because you're in awe of Hashem. Now, this level of awe of Hashem, it comes from the essence, so it's not limited to a letter, a word, a note, or any type of any something, because then it would be based on something. Now we know, what does that mean? Because in being in awe of Hashem, there's many levels. So, for example, the first level is you can be in awe of Hashem because you're afraid of the punishment. And the Torah lists out different rewards and punishment for doing mitzvahs and not doing the mitzvahs, transgressing. So a lot of people, what causes them to operate is they're afraid of Hashem. That's one level. So to speak, you call it the lowest level. But you're still in awe of Hashem, but it's coming based on fear of punishment. Then there's fear of the sin itself. You don't want to do the sin. You don't want to be disconnected from Hashem. Okay, it's next level higher. It's not about the punishment. It's about you don't want to do the sin. You don't want to create that disconnect. Then there's your awe of Elokim. That means you comprehend godliness and you know the whole idea of God, the name of God Elokim, which is all about judgment, and therefore you're in awe of Hashem. There's a higher level even. Yiras Hashem. You're in awe of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the infinite part of Hashem. So far we learned Yiras HaOynesh, being in awe of the punishment. Yiras HaChet, the awe of the sin. Yiras Elokim, the awe of Shem Elokim, and then Yiras Yud Kei Vav Kei, the four levels. Then he goes even a step further. In Yiras Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei itself, there's different levels. What's the different levels? Each one corresponding to one of the letters of Yud, Hey, and Vav Hey. That's already 8 levels, so to speak. Then you have the Yira, which comes from the dot on top of the Yud. This is already another higher level. But the fact is, even though we climb the ladder from Ha'inish to Chet to Lokim to Yud Kei Vav Kei, and then in Yud Kei Vav Kei all the 4 levels and the dot, but nevertheless, it has some kind of connection with something. Even though it gets more refined, but it's something. What is the ultimate being in your awe of Hashem? It's something which you're in awe of Hashem beyond any logic, and beyond any level, beyond any letter, beyond any dot, anything. So that is the ultimate. So the ultimate Yiras Hashem comes not limited to anything. And that's really the prize. The prize is when you're in awe of Hashem just because. For no reason. You just have that special bond that you're in awe of Hashem. It's a very high level. So how do we achieve this level? So the Rebbe says the way you achieve this level, unfortunately or fortunately, comes only when there's opposition. In Kabbalistic terms, when there's a menaged, when there's someone that puts you against the wall and says to you, Do you believe in God or not? And if you do believe in God, I'm going to kill you. So when there's a menagid, when there's an opposition, and when you have to go on Mesiras Nefesh, that's when the pure Yiras Hashem comes out. And like the Rebbe brings where it says in the Talmud, the Hanetzach, the attribute of Nitzachon, that is the building of Yerushalayim. In other words, when there is the midah of Nitzachon, it means when there's opposition of learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, then when someone tells you can't learn Torah, you can't do mitzvahs, and then what happens is you can say, okay, I'm not going to do it. But when you awaken within yourself the real power of Mesiras Nefesh, which is not logic, because you can say I have an excuse, they're not letting me. Then what comes out? That pure Yiras Hashem. It's called the treasure of Yerushalayim. And that's why the verse says, Tzidkas Pirzoinoi B'Yisrael. And it doesn't say Pizroinoi, the fact that we're spread out all over. Why? Because the kindness that Hashem did to do Jewish people, like it says, that He spread us all over, that creates the Parzunoi. That creates the infinite blessing. Like it says, Prazois Teisiv Yerushalayim. So the Rebbe is explaining why the verse says Pizroinoi, because ultimately, yes, what creates Pizroinoi? The Pizroinoi. The fact that He's trying to spread us out all over, and we're having opposition that doesn't allow us, that will give us the greatest blessings of the pure Yerushalayim. In other words, when there's opposition, and there's resistance, and when does it happen in the time of exile? Pizra and Hashem spread us out all over the world, specifically through Galus, specifically through the challenges, that awakens and reveals the level of Yerushalayim, which means the highest level of Yirah, the highest level of awe of Hashem, the treasure of Yerushalayim, that everybody has. It's not like we have to acquire it. We have it from the essence of our soul, which is beyond any level of logic and finite. And when the person brings out through the opposition, the ultimate pure Yiras Hashem, what happens then gets revealed the powerful treasure, the good treasure, which is above finite, above any limits. And like it says, Yiftach Lecha Hashem, God is going to open up for you. It's Oitzrei Toiv, His tremendous good treasure. And from there is going to come Rav Tuv Lebeit Yisrael, a tremendous amount of abundance and goodness for the Jewish people. What does that mean? The Rebbe says like this: like he brings from the Chassidic discourse of the previous Rebbe, like we see, for example, by a king of flesh and blood, that he has tremendous treasures, precious treasures that he doesn't use, only in special scenarios. Up to the point they're so special and they're so hidden that nobody even sees them. No one even knows where they are. But what happens when there's a war? Then the king takes out all the treasures. Why? Because since you have an opposition, you have an enemy that wants to destroy you, so everything, all the treasures come out. At time of war, of time of opposition, all the treasures come out. What does this mean practically? In other words, on a spiritual level, the treasure on high, which is referring to the powerful treasures which are not normally revealed. Or in Kabbalistic terms, it's called Oitzer HaKamos, the treasure which is totally concealed, higher than any level of revelation. And the same, that's on high. The same thing also in our souls, that the treasure of the pure Yiras Shamayim, the pure awe for Hashem, which is in our soul, the point of being an awe of Hashem, which is hidden, buried within our heart, which comes from the essence of our soul, which is high from any revelation. In other words, so this level of Yiras Shamayim, to be in awe of Hashem, it's not only above intellect, which is, we know intellect is the first of the internal powers, but it's even higher than all the revelations of the soul. And it's even higher, besides the fact it's higher than Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, it's even higher than the two levels of the soul, which is called Makiv, which is Chai and Yechida. Why is that? Because Yechida, which is the highest level of the soul, the fact is, even though it's the highest level, and it's a very deep level, but it's still, you can still quantify it. It has a name, it's called Yechida. So it has some kind of level of revelation. And like it says clearly about the soul, there's 5 names. It's called a name: Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechido. So even though Chai and Yechido is Makif, and Nefesh is the lowest level, but they all have one term. They're all a name. You can name that part of the soul. So it means even the level of Yechido, which is a Makif, and it's very, very high, and it's the oneness, it's still a name. Which means there's a certain level of revelation, and it's not the essence of the soul. However, when it comes to the point of Yiras Shamayim, being Or of Hashem, where does that come from? That comes from the essence of the soul. And that's why this level of being an Or of Hashem reaches, when we bring out our Or of Hashem, reaches the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And like we learned before, that this level of Or comes from the essence of Hashem, which is not limited to a word, a letter, a dot on top of the letter. Why? Since this level of being an Or of Hashem, where is it coming from? The essence of the soul, which is higher than Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechidah, which is very high levels. It's even higher on a spiritual level. So therefore, it actually reaches a place which is higher than the 4 letters of Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, of the infinite name Hashem. And it's even higher than the dot of the Yud on top of it. And where does that reach? It reaches the essence of Hashem. So what I was explaining here, when we go and we have the opposition, and it causes us to go into the essence of our soul, which again is higher and deeper than all the 4 levels of all the levels of Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, all the 5 levels of Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechidah. It's even higher than the level of Makif, of Yechidah. We reach the essence of Hashem, which is higher than Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, and higher than the dot on top of it as well. Now this component of revealing this level, why does Hashem reveal this level, this powerful level, the essence? That is so we can win the war, because it's opposition, and we have to win the opposition. And when we go ahead and we do our spiritual work, which is called Mesiras Nefesh, and the only way to win a war is by self-sacrifice. You're not going to win a war logically. You have to think out of the box. It's not even thinking. You have to operate out of the box. You have to operate from a place of Mesiras Nefesh. And just like physically, when it comes to winning a war on a materialistic level, there's tremendous wise people that think about all the logistics of the war and all the strategies, etc. But on the other hand, you have the simple foot soldiers. They don't know the depth of the strategies and all the intricacies of the planning of the war. But what do? A foot soldier knows he goes to war with faith and self-sacrifice. He knows his life could be over. And the main being successful and conquering in the war, where does it happen? It doesn't happen from someone sitting in an office. It happens from the foot soldiers that go on Mesiras Nefesh. They're willing to sacrifice their life. And those are the ones that are successful in the war. So that's on a physical level. And the same thing applies on a spiritual level. That who is the one that wins a spiritual war? Those are the soldiers that Yiras Hashem, being an Or of Hashem, that touches their heart. And like he explains, like the previous Rebbe explains in the Chassidic discourse at length. Now, this that he says, that the success in the war and the victory in the war comes specifically by the foot soldiers. What he's trying to say is he's not saying that the people that strategize and the people that plan the war, they're not part of the success. But what he's saying is that the energy of the success comes from the energy of Mesiras Nefesh, which you find primarily by the foot soldiers. But even those, obviously, that strategize and sit in the offices and plan the war, so even though from one perspective they're using their intellect, but they have to be imbued with the level of Mesiras Nefesh. They shouldn't use only intellect, and even revelations above intellect. They literally have to have a mindset of Mesiras Nefesh, means self-sacrifice, just like the simple foot soldiers. Why is that? Because when they also have the component of they're willing to go and self-sacrifice, so then they're connected into a level which is above anything of revelation. And then they go on, then even though it's not their main thing is to strategize and use their intellect, but since what they have going through them, Mesiras Nefesh, so they get included also into the quality our foot soldier has, that his main thing is to win the war and has the God-fearing part of him. Now, this is what he says, that the godliness is connected to the heart. Why is that? What's the connection with the essence with the heart? Because the essence of the soul, which is above any revelation, where is that found? And this is very powerful, in the heart, not in the mind. So even though generally speaking we know the mind comes first after the heart, but the pnimius halev, the internal, the depth of the heart, is connected to the essence of the soul, because the essence of the soul is above logic, and the essence of the heart is also above logic. And just like the way it works in this materialistic world, in order to be successful in the war, so what happens is the king gives out all the treasures, he gives it all out, and he gives it to the soldiers. And the same thing also is on a spiritual level. In other words, in order for us to be successful in our spiritual war, to learn Torah and to do mitzvahs and to be connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem opens up all the treasures, the infinite treasures that's much higher than any revelation, and they give it to the Jewish people. And through that, what gets revealed is the treasure of being in awe of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the same thing applies as well from the lower level on high. That's what Hashem gives us. But when we go ahead and we stand in a way of Mesiras Nefesh, we're giving over our life to Hashem, and we awaken within us the treasure of Yirah Shemayim, we're in awe for Hashem. So one wind, so to speak, brings the other wind, and Hashem opens up the treasure on high. Like it says, Yiftach Hashem l'chos eitzorei hatoiv. Hashem is going to open up to you as good treasure. And when Hashem opens up the treasure, that helps us in our work to be successful and conquering the war. And this comes down in a materialistic level, that what happens is when we go Mesiras Nefesh and Hashem gives us all those powerful resources, what happens then is we receive Rav Tuv Lebeit Israel, tremendous of goodness to the Jewish people, and it comes down Lamato Me'asara Tvachim, literally down in the physical world, materialistic blessings, B'toiv Hanira V'Anigla, a good blessing that's seen and revealed. So here you have another powerful Chassidic discourse of the Rebbe, connected obviously to Yud Shvat, but more importantly, how when a person goes ahead and you're struggling to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, and you awaken your essence of your soul, you awaken your Yiras Hashem, Hashem opens up and He gives you what you need to be successful, and which translates into tremendous blessings. So let's hope and pray that we do our part, and we connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God gives us all the blessings, and the ultimate blessing of the coming Mashiach. Our next class will be in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. Have a great and blessed week. Shavua Tov.